"You are useless," my brother Philip said with a cold smile. "You still live with Mom, doing nothing. I am the eldest son, so I will take over the company. Pack your things and leave." His wife Holly laughed and suddenly threw water in my face. They enjoyed making me feel small. My father had just passed away, and instead of mourning, they were trying to take everything. My heart burned with anger. I had been patient for too long, but this time I would fight back. They thought they had won, but I had my own plans. Philip and Holly thought I would do nothing, but they were wrong. For years I had stayed silent, but I would not let them take what was mine. My father had worked hard to build his company, and I knew he wanted me to run it. But Philip was greedy. He only cared about money. He and his wife treated me like I was weak, but I was smarter than they thought. I decided to stay quiet and wait for the right time. When the moment came, I would make sure they regretted every cruel word they had said to me. Before my father passed, my life was peaceful. I lived with my mother, taking care of her after her serious illness. We enjoyed small things, like going to a cafe and sharing a parfait. I once dreamed of marriage, but life took a different path. Instead, I focused on work and caring for my mom. I never thought I would have to fight for my place in the family. But now, everything had changed. My mother and I were alone, and I would protect her and my father's company. I would not let Philip and Holly destroy our lives. My father had always worked hard for our family. He was a quiet man, but I knew he loved us deeply. One day, I asked him if Philip would take over the company. His answer surprised me. "Never. I would rather give the company to a stranger," he said. He had no trust in Philip. I didn't understand then, but now I knew why. Philip was selfish and careless with money. My father had built something valuable, and I had to protect it. I promised myself that I would do whatever it took to keep his company safe. Philip had always wasted money. During college, when our family had little, I chose a simple school. But Philip wanted luxury. He went to an expensive private school, never worked, and spent money carelessly. Even when our father asked him to help with the company, Philip refused. He said it was a useless business. But when my father became successful, Philip suddenly wanted it. He even stole money from the company to enjoy his nightlife. My parents hid the truth from me for years, but I knew now. He was the last person who should run the company. Philip called me one day. "I'm bringing my fiancé over next week," he said. "Tell Mom and Dad to prepare the house properly." He acted like we were his servants. When he arrived, his fiancée, Holly, made everything worse. She was dressed in flashy clothes and had a smug smile. When my mother asked if she worked, she scoffed. "Work? No way. I'll be a housewife." No one had even asked about my father's company, but she quickly said, "I won't be helping with the business." The conversation was awful. I could see the disappointment in my parents' eyes. One morning, I received a call from my father's company. "Something terrible has happened," a worker said, his voice shaking. "Your father collapsed. We called an ambulance." My heart pounded. My mother and I rushed to the hospital praying for a miracle. But when we arrived, it was too late. "We did everything we could, but he never woke up," the doctor said. I felt like my world had ended. I called Philip to tell him. His response was heartless. "Well, it happens," he said. He didn't care. His words hurt more than anything. I would never forgive him. At my father's funeral, Philip did something unforgivable. "You need to leave," he said, standing in front of the guests. "I will take over the company now. You are just living off Mom." His wife smirked beside him. I was shocked. Even on the day of our father's funeral, they were thinking about power. My mother looked at them with sadness. I clenched my fists but stayed calm. They thought they had already won, but they had no idea what was coming next. I had been patient for years, but this was the last straw. The next day, Philip went to my father's company, expecting to take over. But when he arrived, he got a surprise. "Brenda is the new president," the employees told him. Philip was furious. He called me, yelling, "What did you do?" This was supposed to be mine. But he was wrong. The will had already been prepared. My father had left everything to me: his company, our house, and his savings. Philip had nothing. He had thought he could push me out, but I was the one with real power now. I had won. Philip had planned to take over the company to fix his financial problems. What he didn't know was that I had already investigated him. He and Holly had huge gambling debts. "How do you know?" he asked in shock. "You think you're smart, but you're nothing." Holly screamed into the phone. I laughed bitterly. "Your debts are not my problem," I said. They had spent years mocking me, but now they were the ones in trouble. I had no reason to help them. I had my own life to live, and they were no longer a part of it. Philip and Holly were now desperate. Without my father's money, they had no way to maintain their luxury lifestyle. "You have to give us something," they begged, but I refused. The will was clear, and I was not giving them a single dollar. They had spent years thinking they were better than me, but now they had to fend for themselves. My father had built something great, and I would protect it. While they struggled, I focused on making the company stronger. I had not just survived their cruelty, I had beaten them completely. With no money left, Philip and Holly were forced to take factory jobs. They couldn't handle the hard work, and their marriage started falling apart. Rumors spread that they were on the edge of divorce. Poetic justice, I thought. They had built their lives on greed and arrogance. Now they had to live with their choices. I felt no guilt. For the first time in years, I felt free. I had taken my father's company, my mother was safe, and Philip was no longer a threat. I had won, and they had lost everything. Philip kept calling, leaving voicemails full of fake apologies and desperate pleas. "We're family, Brenda. You can't just ignore me." But I could, and I did. My mother and I had suffered enough. We blocked their numbers and refused to meet them. "They will never change," Mom said with sadness, and she was right. For years, Philip and Holly had treated us like we were beneath them. Now they were drowning in their own mess, and I felt no sympathy. Cutting them off completely was the best decision I ever made. It was time to focus on my future. With Philip and Holly out of our lives, peace finally returned. I took over my father's company and worked hard to make it even stronger. The employees respected me because they knew I truly cared about the business. My mother, despite her health struggles, was proud of me. "Your father would be happy," she said one evening. For the first time in years, I felt secure. I had spent so long being pushed aside, but now I was in control. I had fought back against those who tried to destroy me, and I had come out stronger. Rumors reached me about Philip and Holly's miserable life. Their debts were too much to handle, and they had no one left to help them. They fought constantly, and soon their marriage completely fell apart. Holly left him, and Philip was alone, stuck in a low-paying job, drowning in debt. He had lost everything: his money, his wife, and his future. Once he had mocked me for being weak, but now he was the one who had truly failed. I felt no anger anymore, just pity. He had chosen this path, and now he had to live with it. I had no regrets. My revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was letting them destroy themselves. I had protected my father's company, cared for my mother, and built a future for myself. I didn't need to stoop to their level. Instead, I had won by simply surviving and succeeding. My mother and I continued to enjoy our small moments of happiness: weekend cafe visits, peaceful evenings, and laughter that no one could take away from us. I had learned a valuable lesson. Real strength isn't about fighting back with anger, but about standing tall and never letting